Hello, my name is Christopher Pepsicki, and this is for Computer Architecture with Professor Do-Young Park. The first thing that I'm going to discuss here is next generation computing, which is the article that we were informed to read, and just my initial findings and my initial understandings. So while I move into this, the first thing I'm going to go into talk about is nanocomputing. Nanocomputing was the smallest subset in the study with only 71 publications, and the top topics in nanocomputing were one, nanomagnetic logic, logic gates, and quantum cellular dot automata. Some of the affiliations with this topic were Notre Dame, us, then we have Technical University of Munich in Germany, and Polytechnic University in Turin, which is in Italy. They all focused on nanomagnetic logic. The major collaborations, once again, we're going to discuss were Notre Dame, Munich, with 9 publications on nanomagnetic logic, which means they all kind of collaborated together. Brazil only had a collaboration internally with 3 publications. Going over and reading this article, this kind of discusses the challenges and opportunities for more advanced and emerging technologies in the field of computing beyond our limits of what we've talked about Moore's law. The limitations are scaling of SRAM and flash memories, technologies in 2D that need for new memory technologies which are addressed, as well as an extension of CMOS scaling and development of second generation materials to replace the silicon that's currently used. This text that we've read also highlights the need for invention and implementation of new information processing technologies to replace the CMOS and the importance of ensuring compatibility with existing technologies and interconnect solutions. The challenges of bridging that gap between material behavior and device functions are discussed, as well as the importance of inventing long-term alternative solutions that address existing more ITRS topical entries. Finally, we can talk about the findings in phase 1 of a broad search on especially next generation architectures, platforms, and approaches. So just a brief overview of what nanocomputing is. We can move on to the next subsector, which is biocomputing. Biocomputing, in terms of DNA and molecular computing, as well as brain-inspired computing, such as neuro and neuromorphic computing, it's a subset field of natural computing with a broad range of approaches based on the biological systems, ranging from using algorithms such as swarm intelligence or membrane computing, mimetic, cellular automata, DNA, molecular computing, neural computing, evolutionary computing, and so on. See, now some of those subsectors, such as membrane computing, kind of goes on to investigate a type of computer models known as membrane systems, which were abstract from the architect structure and the functioning of biological membranes with living cells. And this kind of plays into the same category as DNA, is based on the notion that data can be encoded just like biomolecules as DNA and RNA can be, and can be transformed through the molecular biology to perform arithmetic and logical operations. Both of these, membrane computing and DNA computing, have applications in various fields, including biology, natural language processing, machine language, algorithm theory, and even data mining. Now, another part of it that goes into the biocomputing is the neuromorphic. While this is a subset of biocomputing, it involves electrical circuits to mimic the function of neurons or synapses of the brain. It has potential to revolutionize the way that computing can be done with the development of intelligent machines like AI and the ability that they can learn and adapt to their environment. So the applications that the neuromorphic computing has is robotics, autonomous vehicles, images and speech recognition. Now, the last thing that we talked about when it came to biocomputing was the quantum dot cellular automata, or QCA. It is a transistorless nanotechnology based computing paradigm that represents binary information in cells that are coupled through electromagnetic fields but have no current flow. The state of the cell is determined by what state the neighboring cell is, but not by the distance. We can use different polarization values or logic operations can be performed with very low power consumption compared to the field that we're using now. Now, along with that, nanomagnetic logic, or MNL, can be viewed as magnetic implementation of this quantum dot cellular automata, where information can be signal processed through magnetic field interactions in nanocells. There are quite a few advantages of using this, which is reconfirmable logic, reduced power consumption, low energy dissipation in switching. They're functional at better temperatures. However, there are going to be some challenges that arise when we're trying to implement this into the everyday world. So now the next topic that was discussed and that we read about was spintronics. It's a kind of a new technology that uses both the spin and magnetic momentum of the electron to encode this information instead of what we do now of just writing the disk in lights and lasers. Even though that this type of technology goes back into the 1970s, it has recently increased in popularity due to the discovery of MTJ, which is magnetic tunnel junctions, and spin torque transfer, or STT. The MTJ, or the magnetic tunnel junction, is created when two conducting electrodes of the ferromagnetic material are separated by a thin layer of a dielectric layer through which electrons can tunnel, resulting in electrical conduction. The electrical current that the tunnels between the electrode consist of just two particles, either a spin up or a spin down. The MTJ has a high resistance differences at room temperature, making it more suitable for both memory and ultra low power computing. The other thing that we can talk about is MRAM, which is magnetic random access memory, which bases on the direction use of the magnetization to store information. It can be designed either with the MTJs or the STT. MRAM had a non-viable, have an unlimited high-speed reading and writing endurance, operate at high speeds with low voltages, have comparable densities to CMOS, and 3D integration, and shortening the data between the processor and the main memory. So the way that we can look at this to develop this logic, including spin transfers and using spin as a logic state variable, spin transistors, since they reduce a very low power consumption, we have the ability to scale them through and put them through the scale of CMOS. The second approach is to assign logic 0 and 1 to the polarization of a single spin magnetic field to present additional capabilities beyond what we currently have. The next topic that was discussed is the optical and photonic. There has been roughly 1,400 publications between 2013 and 2016 on optical computing using lights and photons instead of using electricity or electrons to perform these types of tasks. While the complete replacement of the electron components with optical components has not yet occurred, most research has focused on the development of individual optical components to work in tandem with the electrical components. An all optical signal has the potential to overcome the bandwidth and speed limits of the electrical circuit with processing bandwidth up to several terahertz. Now, various optoelectronic integrated computing components exist on the market now. The recent accomplishments in the academic world include the development of photonic circuits for WDM, which is wavelength division multiplexing, non-volatile photonic memory, and all optical logic gates. The two specific subdomains in the optical photonic computing of silicon photonics and nano, which both have commercial potential, but silicon photonics have become the benchmark platform and offer a magnitude of improvement in all bandwidth, latency, reliability, and power efficiency. Silicon-based integrated, it has the potential for significant growth in the future, but there are still some challenges that we, as the people who are studying computer science now, have to address. These challenges include limitation on optical functionalities, light emission and detection, module bandwidth and depth. To overcome and to work with researchers to overcome these challenges, they are exploring the use of heterogeneous silicon, which combines differently with each material and technologies and waveguides platforms to achieve the desired functionalities. The next topic inside of this one is the nanophotonic. It is a field of research that combines nanocomputing as well, aiming to create a higher density optical integrated circuit that can overcome the limitations of the electronic and regular circuits by confining the light being used at the nanoscale, and has the potential to create a more advanced device with higher performance capabilities. But once again, just like the silicone-based, this one also has challenges because it's, the challenges that we're going to see in this are, one, the structural features on how we're going to have to optimize them, geometric characteristics, surface morphologies, and material compositions. There are also challenges compatible with standard CMOS technologies for a low-cost mass production of nanatomic devices. Another part of this is also plasmonics. And this is a branch of the nanophotonics, that focuses on exploiting surface plasmon polaritons, or SPPs, in metal nanostructures to build these optical circuits that overcome the speed of the electrons. SPPs are the coupling of the electromagnetic waves to the motion or the charge of free electrons at what the interface of the metallic or dielectric material would be. And these allow them to guide and confine the light that we're using at nanoscales than smaller wavelengths of light. It offers a synergy of electronics and photonics by combining the dimensions of both the electronics and the speed of the photonics, bridging that gap between them. But once again, just with everything else, there are still things that we're going to face challenges with. Record. Hello, once again, my name is Christopher Pevsicki, and this is going to be part 2 of our presentation for Professor Do-Young Park's class, Computer Architecture. We were told to choose a subtopic of next generation computing to discuss into further detail, and I have chose biocomputing. And there we go. So the two articles of reference that I'm using is one, Emerging Memory Devices for Neuromorphic Computing, and DNA Computer, Present and Future. The first one that I'm going to discuss here is Emerging Memory Devices for Neuromorphic Computing. And some of the topics that I'm going to discuss is ReRAM, or resistive random access memory, diffusive memristor, phase change memory, and synaptic transistor. The first one that I'll talk about is the ReRAM. They are two terminal resistance switches that can retain their resistance state based on history of applied voltages and currencies. They really show a lot of attractiveness for various properties, which can include scalability, CMOS compatibility, the low power consumption, and this simply put, the analog conductance modulation. These resistive RAM or ReRAM are usually and consist of like simple metals, insulators or metal, like, and structure can be observed through various materials such as oxide, nitrates, chalecoinosides, and organic material. And based on the filament rupture mechanism, there are two different types of these devices that are important for the neuromorphic computing aspect, namely the drift and the diffusive memristor. The switching mechanism can be categorized into an ionic or electronic switch devices. The exact mechanism for the most of these systems, we still don't have a full understanding yet, but recent studies have showed that metal cations may also be mobile in traditional AON or VCM devices, providing new insight into these mechanisms. These types of resistors and things like that are one of the most promising technologies for memory and unconventional computing. The thing that we can talk about now is the diffusive memristor. While going through this article, it kind of discusses the use of them with AG metal species in neuromorphic computing, especially for emulating synaptic plasticity and neural behavior. The formation of the filament and the relaxation process of these types of resistors are driven by an interfacial energy minimization, allowing for biorealistic temporal dynamics. This diffusive memristor has been demonstrated to exhibit short and long-term synaptic plasticity paired with a non-volatile drift to demonstrate SDPT. And along with that, it can also mimic the integrated fire behavior of what we know of a biological neuron. The other thing that we can kind of discuss is the phase change memory. So this is just a slide on some basic standpoints of this resistor. Now we can go into the PCM and the phase change memory. The phase change memory uses a difference between systole and amorphous phases to create this electronic synapses. But the challenge of achieving the reset, which involves menting and rapid cooling of the crystallized matrix, two PCM devices have been used to implement STDP and the three-layer neural network made up of the PCM synapses, and these have been demonstrated. High density integration and thermal management are really the biggest challenges that we're facing when we're scaling the PCM devices. But along with that is also the stability of the amorphous state, because it does create a resistance drift. Now, Tuma et al. Has proposed a PCM-based neuron that mimics the evolution of a membrane potential in what we know as the kind of description of a biological neuron, but a complete PCM-based neuromorphic circuit made up of these kind of base neurons has also been demonstrated, which I find very interesting. The fact that we have created something that is able to act like our biological neurons without actually having our like understanding or the ability of the way our brain works. The next thing that we can talk about is the synaptic transistors. Now, the applications of these, which are structurally inspired by a transistor in the neuromorphic system, these are used as gate terminals to manipulate the conductance of the channel, which could either be volatile or non-volatile, resulting in short and long-term plasticity. Having this kind of ability to result in short and long-term plasticity allows decoupling write operations from read operations, which is something that two-terminal member resistors device lacks. And over the years, the operating mechanism responsible for conductance changed has evolved from electric double layer to ferroelectric and battery-like. We can also discuss, along with this, its promising technologies with the 2D Van der Waals layers, crystals, and quasi 2D transition metal oxides whose properties can be turned with ion gating, which also exhibit both short-term and long-term plasticities with very low energy consumption. These have shown a linear potential and depression with multiple conductive states and spike rate dependence. Now, I did skip to the next slide, which kind of starts to go over the terminology of the next article. But, we can now look into the DNA computing, which is also known as molecular computing, in a new approach that is parallel computation based on groundbreaking work. So on the screen right now is just a couple of the terms that are going to be used to grasp an understanding of what this is. So just a basic idea of DNA computing is a collection of specially selected DNA strands whose combinations will result in the solution of some problem. The main idea, though, is to encode data in DNA strand and use tools for molecular biology to execute computational operations. The DNA computations have the potential to outperform electronic computers in terms of energy consumption and storage space while being highly parallel. So things like this have already started being looked into, but through this article, we can kind of go into the motivation and history that they use to kind of start this idea of DNA computing. But despite having huge advances in miniaturization, the underlying framework of sequential logic used by today's supercomputer has kind of remained the same. And some of the researchers who are studying this are investigating new media and computational models such as quantum, optical, and DNA-based. But DNA computing represents potential breakthrough through the information density and massively parallel operations of DNA. So back in 1994, Leonard Allam solved a small instance of computation intractable problems by using a small vial of DNA, showing the potential of DNA computing. DNA computing is grounded in reality because information can be represented in a sequence of DNA molecules, and operations on DNA can be carried out on all strands in this Tab2's vial. So this is where you're going to start to kind of see just the DNA fundamentals, since DNA is a molecule made up of 4 nucleotides, and it has 2 main functions: coding for the production of proteins and self-replication. And the structure of DNA is just a double helix made up of 2 complementary strands, where A bonds with T and C bonds with G, and DNA composed of a sugar, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous group. Each strand has 3 and 5 end, and to the 2 strands run in opposite directions. Now that we have an idea now of the fundamentals of what DNA is, we can now move on to the principles of DNA computing. So DNA is a powerful information storage molecule, which we have in living cells and has been refined by billions of years of evolution. DNA computing uses the chemical properties of this DNA molecule to perform calculations and is executed through biochemical operations such as synthesizing, mixing, annealing, melting, amplifying, separating, extracting, cutting, ligating, substrating, marking, destroying, detecting. I can go on. We've already discussed all of these terms. But DNA computers use base 4 values, A, T, C, and G, to encode information that can solve any kind of conceivable problem by chemically creating every possible sequence on a trillions of different DNA strands and filtering out the correct sequence. So now the present future advantages and disadvantages. This computing is a field that explores people using DNA molecule as their basis for computation, since there are billions of potential answers simultaneously, making suitable for solving kind of logical issues becomes a problem. However, the challenges to practical control the reliable DNA computing, including difficulties in the design of the oligonucleotides, nucleotides, and molecular biology protocols for error-tolerant computing, there is also a lack of a killer app for DNA computing. DNA computing does, though, have advantages, such as the ability to perform millions of operations simultaneously, generate a complete set of potential solutions, and effectively handling massive amounts of working memory. However, along with advantages and the brief disadvantages, they are requiring impractically large amounts of memory to generate solution sets, as many empirical uncertainties. Though that this is a foreseeable thing in the future, and with advances being made quite frequently, DNA computers cannot replace the traditional computers at this point, mainly because they are just unprogrammable.